It didn't happen on stage. It didn't happen in front of cameras. It didn't even happen in some boardroom with lawyers and contracts. It happened in a quiet London house, on a grey morning, when Freddie Mercury woke up, padded into the kitchen in a robe, and found a tabloid on the table. His own face stared back at him. Not in a glossy promo shot. Not in a review. In a headline. The kind of headline nobody wanted in the 1980s. The kind of headline that could ruin a career, shatter a family, turn a legend into a scandal overnight. Queen star's secret gay life, it screamed. Below, smaller but still brutal. Best friend tells all. Freddie picked up the paper with trembling fingers. He began to read. Every private detail. Every habit. Every late-night excess. Quoted. Described. Sold. The article referred to a close associate, a trusted confidant, a man who has been by his side for years. And then he saw the line that made his blood run cold. He won't listen to anyone, the friend said. Not the band, not his ex, not his family. Only me. Freddie didn't need the name. He knew who it was. Paul Prenter. His manager. His drinking partner. His gatekeeper. The man who'd been answering his phone, screening his calls, deciding who reached him and who didn't. The man who told him radio stations weren't interested in his solo work. The man who'd refused to pass on messages from Brian and Roger more than once. The man who always managed to be in the room when Freddie was most vulnerable. The man Freddie thought was on his side. By the time he finished reading the article, Freddie Mercury, frontman of Queen, master of crowds, architect of some of the most powerful performances in rock history, was shaking so hard the paper rattled in his hands. He had been betrayed. Not by the press. Not by strangers. By the one man he had let get too close. This is the story of the day Freddie Mercury fired Paul Prenter. The day he realized the person hurting his life, reputation, and band the most was the one he thought he needed. It hadn't always felt like a betrayal. In the beginning, it felt like relief. Paul Prenter arrived in Freddie's life like a solution to a problem he hadn't known how to name. Queen was exploding, the schedule was insane, the phone never stopped ringing. Everyone wanted something: interviews, appearances, favors, meetings, dinners, more. Freddie loved it. And he was drowning in it. Paul was clever in the way quiet men sometimes are. Not the brash, loud type that tried to impress him with backstage stories and industry names. He watched, listened, and made himself useful. You need someone who can say no for you, Paul had said early on, sitting in a smoky dressing room, legs crossed, voice steady. Someone who isn't afraid to be the bad guy. Freddie had smirked. And that's you, darling. If you let it be, Paul replied. So Freddie did. At first, it was small things. No interviews today, he's exhausted. No, he's not coming to that party. No, the label doesn't get to dictate every move. It felt good. Power filtered, controlled, manageable. Then there were the other perks. Paul knew where the late-night bars were. He knew who supplied what. He knew which clubs were safe and which ones weren't. He knew which hotel back doors staff would quietly keep open for the right people. Freddie liked that, too. Paul was there for the laughter, the drinking, the post-show highs. He stayed when everyone else left. He knew the version of Freddie that collapsed on hotel beds at 5 a.m., eyeliner smudged, voice hoarse, needing to talk or not talk at all. "You're the only one who understands me," Freddie had said once, drunk, lying on a sofa while the record they'd been playing clicked at the end of the side. Paul had smiled, satisfied. I know. He was there when Freddie began drifting away from the band, too. "Oh, they don't get you," Paul would say, rolling his eyes. "They want you predictable. Safe. Rock anthem Freddie. Not the Freddie who wants to experiment, push, shock. They complain about my nights out, Freddie muttered once. Brian gives me that disappointed schoolteacher look. Paul snorted. They're jealous. They go home. You go out. They don't like that, you don't need them. The poison was subtle. They don't get you. They're jealous. You don't need them. And after a while, Freddie started repeating the lines himself. He stopped returning calls as quickly. He canceled meetings. He missed studio time. Radio doesn't like the new tracks, Paul said flatly one morning, flicking ash into an overflowing tray. Too many synthesizers, too weird. They're not playing them. Freddie frowned. Did they say that? They didn't have to, Paul replied. I spoke to a few people. They think you've lost the plot. The words lodged in Freddie's chest. Lost the plot. So what do I do? He demanded. Stop trying to please them, Paul said. You're not theirs. You're yours. It sounded good. Noble, even. Freddie didn't know, not then, that Paul had simply not done the work. Didn't push the singles. Didn't make the calls. Didn't hustle the way a manager should. It was easier to keep Freddie inward, insulated, dependent. It wasn't that Paul hated him. It was worse. Paul needed him. And the more Freddie pulled away from other people, the more important Paul became. Mary saw it. You're different with him, she said once, quietly, in Freddie's kitchen. Harder. Sharper. Like everything has to be a performance, even when you're exhausted. Freddie snapped back, too quickly, he's the only one who lets me breathe. She didn't argue. She never did. It was one of the reasons he trusted her. But the distance grew. Between him and Mary. Between him and the band. Between him and the version of himself that wasn't always chasing the next distraction, the next high, the next numbness. If someone had told him then that the man bringing him drinks, passing him cigarettes, whispering in his ear, was also slowly cutting the lines that connected him to the people who truly loved him, Freddie might have laughed. He had no trouble seeing villains in the press, in the labels, in the church, in his past. He didn't yet know he had one in his living room. It was raining. Freddie always remembered that part. How the world looked washed out and sullen through the kitchen window, droplets racing each other down the glass. He'd slept badly. Too much drinking, not enough food, a show of bravado at some nightclub that had left him emptier than usual when he got home. He shuffled into the kitchen barefoot, robe loose, hair a mess, fully prepared to complain about the weather to whoever was unlucky enough to be there to hear it. Mary was there. That alone was strange enough. She didn't just appear early without reason. She sat at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea that had clearly gone cold. Her face was pale. Her eyes were red in that way that suggested either lack of sleep or crying. Something in Freddie's chest tightened. "Morning, love," he said, forcing a yawn. "You look like you've seen a ghost." Mary swallowed. "Freddie," she said quietly. "You need to sit down." The alarm went from a murmur to a roar. He tried to keep it light. "What is this, an intervention? If you're about to complain about the state of my liver, you can." "Freddie," she said again. "Please." There was a newspaper on the table. Folded in half. Headlines facing down. He pulled out a chair and sat slowly, the robe gathering around him. "You're scaring me, Mary." "I wanted to get here before he did," she said, voice shaking. "Before who did?" "Paul." He frowned. "Why?" She slid the newspaper across the table, headlines down, as if touching the front page had burned her. "Don't get angry that I brought it," she whispered. "Get angry at who gave them the story." Freddie stared at the paper. A part of him already knew. He flipped it over. His face. Big, sharp, frozen mid-performance. Mic in hand, vest open, sweat glistening on his chest, reduced to a commodity on cheap print. Queen Star's Secret Gay Life, the headline screamed. Subheadings in smaller, gleeful type. Orgies, drugs and darkness. Best friend reveals all. For a second, he didn't understand the words. They blurred, sliding over each other. He forced his eyes to focus. The article was a swamp of exaggeration and invention, but here and there, real details stuck out like jagged rocks. His house layout. Names of specific clubs. What time he usually woke up. Which phone he used to avoid the main line. The way he fought with Brian. The way he spoke to Mary when drunk. Things strangers couldn't know. Very close friends reveal. A source who has been with him for years. He won't listen to anyone, says one insider. Freddie's stomach twisted. He scanned deeper. That was when he saw the line. He doesn't listen to Queen anymore. Not to the band, not to his old girlfriend. He only listens to me. No name. But the voice came off the page like a slap. He'd heard that tone before. He'd heard that argument. He'd heard that smug, self-satisfied little phrase. He only listens to me. Freddie's hands began to shake. Mary, he whispered. Tell me he didn't. She said nothing. Her silence answered for her. The world around him seemed to contract, the walls, the rain, the hum of the fridge, all of it pressing inward. He wouldn't, Freddie said, more to himself than to her. Not Paul. He's an arse, but he wouldn't. He trailed off. Memories flashed, sharp and unwelcome. Paul answering the phone and not handing it over. Paul laughing about those idiots in the press while knowing exactly how they worked. Paul complaining about money. Paul disappearing for hours in cities where tabloids paid cash for stories. You saw this morning? Freddie asked, voice brittle. Mary nodded. I bought it at the corner shop. It was everywhere, Freddie. He closed his eyes. They knew too much, she continued quietly. Things only someone in the house could tell them. I thought, maybe they made pieces up. Maybe they guessed. But then there was that line. He only listens to me. She swallowed. Freddie, that's what he always says, isn't it? When someone tries to talk to you. He'll just listen to me. Freddie's vision blurred. For a second, he thought he might be sick right there on the kitchen table. It's him, he whispered. He felt anger rise, hot, volcanic, but it was drowned, at first, by something colder. Humiliation. How long has he been selling me? He asked. Mary's eyes filled with tears. I don't know. He did. He knew, suddenly, in a way his brain hadn't caught up with but his body recognized. Too long. Footsteps sounded faintly in the hallway. Mary's head snapped toward the doorway. Freddie, she whispered urgently, he's here. Freddie stared at the paper one last second, then at the kitchen door. The man who'd been guarding his life was about to walk into the room holding the proof he'd been tearing it apart. Freddie Mercury, who could improvise on stage in front of thousands without fear, had never felt less prepared for a conversation in his life. The door opened like any other morning. Paul walked in humming, flicking ash from a cigarette into a mug he'd long ago claimed as an ashtray. He wore his usual half-slept-in clothes, leather jacket hanging open over a rumpled shirt. His hair was a mess in that too-calculated way that said he never really stopped for long enough to rest. Morning, he said, almost cheerful. You look like death, Fred. Late one last night? You should try sleeping occasionally, you know, even gods need their 8 hours. He stopped when he saw Mary. And then he saw the newspaper. For the briefest of moments, half a second at most, something like panic flickered across his face. Then the mask slid back into place. "Oh, that," he said lightly, nodding toward it. "Christ, they're at it again. Don't read that trash. Makes you go mad." Freddie's eyes were fixed on him. Unblinking. Mary rose quietly. "I'll leave you," she murmured. Freddie didn't look at her. "Stay." There was an edge in his voice Paul wasn't used to. He laughed, trying to cut through the tension. "Ooh, sounds serious. Are we having a family meeting? Should I fetch Roger? He'd love a bit of drama with breakfast." "Did you talk to them?" Freddie interrupted. The question hung in the air. Paul blinked. "Who?" "The paper." "Oh, for God's sake, Freddie. Did you talk to them?" he repeated, voice lower, more dangerous. Paul exhaled loudly, rolling his eyes. "Everyone talks to them. They harass the crew, the hotel staff, the barman. They make things up. It's what they do." "They knew things," Freddie said. "Things only someone in this house could know." Paul shrugged. "Guesswork. They throw enough darts, one hits the board." Freddie lifted the paper with trembling fingers. "He doesn't listen to Queen. Not to the band, not to his ex. He only listens to me." He read the lines slowly, then looked up. "Sound familiar?" Silence. Mary's breath caught. Paul's jaw tightened, just for a moment, before he forced a laugh. "Oh, come on," he said. "You think you're the only person in the world whose friends talk big? I'm the closest, I know him best, everyone wants a piece." Freddie stood. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "For years," he said quietly, "you've told me you're the only one I can trust. You say it when you push people away. When you don't pass on calls. When you cancel meetings without telling me. They don't understand you, Freddie. Only I do." Paul shifted his weight, cigarette burning dangerously low between his fingers. "And now," Freddie continued, "the papers are printing the same line. Word for word." "You're being paranoid," Paul snapped. "You get like this sometimes. You drink too much, you don't sleep, and suddenly everyone's out to get you." Mary flinched. Freddie didn't. "Paranoid," he echoed. "Is that what this is?" "Yes," Paul said. "You think I'm stupid enough to sell you out? I'm your friend." "Friends don't make money off my secrets," Freddie said softly. "Friends don't sit in bars giving stories to men with tape recorders. Friends don't tell the world about my bed, my house, my fights, my—" "Your fans want to know who you really are," Paul cut in, voice sharper now. "You built this circus. You don't get to act shocked when people peek behind the tent." Freddie stared at him. There it was. The shift. The slip. "You did it," he said. Not a question. Paul's eyes flashed. "I did what I had to do." The room seemed to tilt. Mary stepped back, hand over her mouth. Freddie's breath grew shallow. "How much?" he whispered. Paul frowned. "What? How much did they give you for me?" Paul scoffed. "Don't be theatrical. How much?" Freddie insisted, voice steady but deadly. Paul hesitated, then lifted his chin. "Enough," he said. "Enough to make up for all the times I cleaned up your messes for free." The sentence hit harder than any headline. Freddie inhaled, slow and ragged. "You think," he said quietly, "that this is payment? That this is owed?" Paul shrugged. "You wouldn't be where you are without people like me. You think the world revolves around your little genius, but it doesn't. Someone has to feed the machine. Someone has to protect you." "Protect me?" Freddie repeated. His voice was dangerously calm now. Mary had seen that calm before. On stage, right before he tore into a note that could split the air. Off stage, right before he ended a relationship. Yes, protect you, Paul said, heat rising in his tone. From them. From the band whining about your nights out. From the label trying to own you. From every idiot who wants a piece. I took the heat. I kept you insulated. I kept you, pure. Freddie let out a short, sharp laugh. Pure, he said. Is that what you call this? He tapped the paper. Paul's jaw set. You wanted to be untouchable. I made you untouchable. So what if I cashed in on what I knew? You've been cashing in on what's inside you for years. Freddie stepped closer. For the first time in my life, he whispered, I'm standing in front of someone who claims to love me, and I can't feel anything but disgust. Paul flinched. You don't mean that, he said. I do, Freddie replied. The word hung between them. Final. Mary's hand trembled around her mug. Freddie had been betrayed before, by lovers, by the press, by his own body. But this was different. This was systematic. Calculated. A slow bleed disguised as devotion. And now, face to face with the man who had done it, he felt something inside him crack. And something else begin to harden. The kitchen felt too small to contain the anger. It was in the air, hot and heavy, pressing against the walls, buzzing under Freddie's skin. For a second, he didn't speak. He simply stared at Paul, taking in the man's posture, his defiant tilt of the head, the faint smear of ash on his fingers. This was someone he had once trusted enough to let into his most private spaces. And now, he realized, he didn't know him at all. You think this is about money, Freddie said quietly. It is about money, Paul shot back. And respect. I've given you years of my life. I've watched you break yourself for these people. I've watched you be eaten alive. And what do I get? Stress. Late nights. Cleaning up. Waiting outside hotel rooms like a dog. No one asked you to be a martyr, Freddie said. You needed one, Paul replied. And don't pretend you did it all alone. There are tape operators, managers, lawyers, promoters, people whose names you don't even bother to learn, all holding up your bloody empire. I'm just the only one honest enough to admit I wanted something back. You took it from my flesh, Freddie whispered. Paul's eyes flashed. You act like you're the victim. You feed off attention. You can't breathe without people looking at you. Not like this, Freddie said. Not through keyholes. He thought of the photos. The angles. The distances. How long have you been selling them, he asked. Since Munich? Since before. Do they come to you or do you go to them? Paul looked away. Does it matter? It does to me. Paul sighed, as if annoyed by the insistence. They came to me first, he said. A friend of a friend. Wanted background material, color. Nothing big. A few details here and there. I thought, why not? If they're going to print lies, might as well give them something true. Freddie stared at him. True. Oh, don't be naive, Paul scoffed. You think no one whispers in this town? You think the clubs keep secrets? Everyone knows about the parties. The men. The coke. They're already talking. I just gave them context. Freddie's hands clenched. You told them who I fight with, he said. You told them what time I wake up, what I drink, how I talk to the people I love. You told them I'm gay in a country that loves to see men like me punished for it. You're not a victim, Paul snapped. You're rich, famous, adored. You'll survive a scandal. You always do. And if I don't? Freddie asked. If they blacklist me? If radio stops playing the records? If studios decide I'm too risky? If my family sees this? If my mother sees this? For a moment, guilt flickered across Paul's face. Just a moment. Then it vanished. They were going to come for you anyway, he muttered. This just moved the clock. Freddie inhaled sharply. Mary spoke for the first time in minutes. Get out, she whispered. Paul turned to her, eyes narrowing. This is none of your. Get out, she repeated, louder now. He scoffed. He'll calm down. He always does. He needs me. Freddie's voice cut through the room like a blade. No, he said. I don't. Paul looked back at him, stunned. You don't mean that, he said. Freddie stepped closer, every inch of his body radiating a quiet, controlled fury that was more frightening than any scream. I let you into my house, he said. Into my work. Into my bed. I let you stand between me and the world because I thought you were helping me breathe. His voice shook. But all this time, you were tightening the noose. Don't be dramatic, Paul muttered. You sold me, Freddie continued, as if he hadn't spoken. You sold my privacy, my weaknesses, my family, my faults. And you call it context. He took a breath that felt like swallowing glass. You're fired. The words hung there. Simple. Flat. Deadly. Paul stared at him, as if waiting for the punchline. Fred. You're fired, Freddie repeated. You don't answer my phone. You don't speak to the press. You don't set foot in my dressing room. You don't book shows, flights, hotels. You don't stand in front of me anywhere, ever again. Paul shook his head slowly, something like fear creeping into his eyes. You can't do a tour without me, he said. We'll see, Freddie replied. You can't handle the vultures. I'd rather face them alone, Freddie said, than sleep next to one. Silence. Paul swallowed. You'll regret this, he said. Freddie smiled sadly. I already regret letting you stay this long. Paul looked at Mary. This is your fault, he spat. You and that sanctimonious band. Whispering, turning him against me. You're threatened. You're all threatened. Mary held his gaze with a steadiness that almost unnerved him. I was threatened, she said quietly. By what you were doing to him. Paul turned back to Freddie, making one last attempt. We're the same, you and I, he said. We like the dark places. We like the secrets. Don't pretend you're some innocent angel now that the world has seen your claws. Freddie stepped back, slowly, as if distancing himself physically might help sever something spiritual. Get out of my house, he said. This time, there was no tremor in his voice. For a moment, Freddie thought Paul might refuse. Might push. Might explode. Instead, he laughed, a short, bitter bark. You don't know how lucky you were to have me, he said. When they turn on you, remember this. I was the only one willing to get dirty for you. He flicked his cigarette butt into the sink and walked out. The sound of the front door closing echoed down the hallway like a gunshot. Freddie stood very still. The room felt different. Lighter. Heavier. Freer. And emptier. He's gone, Mary whispered. Freddie looked at the tabloid on the table. No, he said softly. Not yet. Because the words he'd spoken were final. But the damage Paul had done still had to be uncovered. Later, when the house was quiet again, Freddie sat at the kitchen table with the crumpled tabloid in front of him and the phone off the hook. He'd thought firing Paul would bring instant relief. Instead, a new feeling settled in his chest. Grief. Mary moved quietly around the kitchen, making tea neither of them really wanted. She knew better than to fill the silence with reassurances. Freddie wasn't ready for comfort yet. He was still inventorying damage. He didn't work the records, Freddie muttered suddenly. Mary looked up. What? He didn't work them, Freddie repeated, eyes distant. He told me radio didn't care. That they thought I'd lost the plot. That no one wanted to play the solo stuff. But he never pushed. He never fought. He never believed in it enough to fight. Memories snapped into place. The times Paul had brushed off disappointing sales. The half-hearted explanations. The shrugging excuses. It was easier to blame me, Freddie said. Easier to let me think I'd failed than admit he hadn't done his job. Mary sat down across from him. He isolated you, she said softly. From the band. From people who challenged him. Freddie's jaw clenched. He told me Brian was judging me, he said. That Roger thought I was ridiculous. That John was fed up with my drama. He'd repeat little things they said, twist them, feed them to me just enough to make me wary. She nodded. He did the same with them. Freddie's head snapped up. What? They'd call, she said. Ask how you were. Say they'd tried to reach you. Say Paul told them you were too busy. Or asleep. Or not interested. The gap between you and them, she exhaled. He widened it on purpose. Freddie felt sick. He made me feel like they were against me, he whispered. And all this time. They were still there, Mary said. Waiting. Freddie looked at his hands. I let him, he said. The admission hurt more than any insult. I let him sit between me and the people who mattered. I let him speak for me. I let him tell me who I should trust. I let him take my phone, my schedule, my nights, my secrets. Mary's voice was gentle. You were tired. You were overwhelmed. You were human. I was lazy, Freddie snapped. I didn't want to deal with the boring bits. I wanted to be adored, not responsible. He laughed bitterly. And so I handed the keys of my life to a man who was happy to drive it into a wall. Mary reached across the table and squeezed his hand. You can take them back, she said. He shook his head slowly. Not all of them, he replied. Some doors don't close properly once they've been kicked open. He looked at the headline again. Queen Star's Secret Gay Life. He thought of his parents. His sister. The neighbors back in Feltham. The band. The world. It's not that I'm ashamed, he said quietly. I'm not. Not of who I am. Not anymore. But I wanted to choose the moment. The way. The context. You didn't get that chance, Mary said. No, he agreed. He took it. He took that choice from me and handed it to men who see me as a story, not a soul. He swallowed. He stole my voice, he whispered. Not on stage. Off it. Mary's eyes shimmered. You can get that back too, she said. He stared at her for a long moment. Can I? He asked. Yes, she said firmly. By deciding what you do next. He leaned back, staring at the ceiling. What I do next, he echoed. He thought of calling the band. He thought of suing the paper. He thought of disappearing. Instead, he stood. Where are you going? Mary asked. He picked up the phone from where it lay like a dead thing on the counter. Plugged it back into the wall. The dial tone hummed to life. I'm going to tell Brian, he said. From me. Not from them. Not from some parasite with a paycheck. His hand shook as he dialed. Each ring felt like a step toward something terrifying and necessary. On the fourth, Brian answered, voice cautious. Hello. It's me, Freddie said. A pause. Fred. Silence stretched between them, the weight of months of miscommunication, suspicion, distance. Freddie closed his eyes. You're going to see things about me in the papers, he said. Things I didn't choose. Things I should have told you myself. Brian didn't interrupt. And I need you to hear it from me, Freddie continued. Paul, he's not with me anymore. I fired him. He talked. He sold. He betrayed. His voice broke. On the other end of the line, Brian exhaled slowly. I'm sorry, he said. I'm so sorry, Fred. Freddie opened his eyes. You're not surprised, he said. No, Brian replied. We tried to warn you. But you weren't ready to see it. I see it now, Freddie whispered. There was a strange kind of comfort in admitting it out loud. I see it now. Paul was gone by afternoon. Not just from the house. From the life. Keys returned. Numbers blocked. Names crossed off. The industry would still see him around, at bars, in shadows, trading stories, clinging to the last scraps of proximity to fame. But for Freddie, he became absence. A gap in the space where a familiar voice used to be. The first days were raw. There were practical matters, of course, managers to reshuffle, calls to make, damage to control. Lawyers spoke in low, precise voices about defamation and damages and options. Publicists spun, as they always did. But the legal work was nothing compared to the emotional excavation. Freddie found him everywhere. In the empty chair by the phone. In the lighter on the table. In the ashtray he'd claimed as his own. In the part of Freddie's brain that still, instinctively, wanted to ask, what do you think, before making a decision. He had to retrain himself. To pick up the phone himself. To answer the door himself. To listen to his own instincts. The band came over. Brian, quiet but solid, brought music ideas. We keep going, he said. On our terms. Roger brought jokes, loud and inappropriate. We knew he was a wanker, he said. Just glad you finally caught up. John brought presents, quiet, steady, a man who didn't talk much but stayed longer than he needed to. Mary brought tea, blankets, and the kind of silence that holds you up instead of swallowing you. One night, when the others had gone and the house had settled into its late-night hum, she found Freddie in the sitting room, staring at nothing. You're somewhere far away, she murmured, sitting beside him. He looked at her, eyes tired but clearer than they'd been in months. I keep going over it, he said. All the little ways he pushed. The times I thought, that doesn't feel right, and then, ignored it. You were scared, she said. You were lonely. He offered certainty. He nodded slowly. You know what frightens me most? He asked. What? That he didn't make me do anything I didn't already want to do. He just took my worst impulses and fed them. He took my desire to escape and turned it into isolation. He took my hunger for adoration and turned it into dependency. He swallowed. He took my vulnerabilities and sold them. Mary's hand found his. And still, she said, you're here. You're still you. He didn't break that. He let out a shaky laugh. I'm not sure who me is, he admitted. Without someone else pulling the strings. Maybe now, she said, you get to find out. He looked at her. Do you think, he asked softly, that I can come back from this? She understood he didn't just mean the scandal. He meant the breach of trust. The shame. The knowledge that he'd let someone so bent on self-interest stand between him and the truth for so long. Yes, she said. But you won't be the same. I don't know if I want to be, he replied. Silence settled again. Eventually, he stood. There was one last thing to do. He walked into his study and opened a drawer. Inside lay the tabloid, folded, and a handful of photographs, the ones taken without his consent, without his knowledge, without care for his humanity. He held them for a moment. Then he took them outside. The night air was cold against his skin. He lit a match with fingers that no longer shook as much. One by one, he fed the photos and the paper to the small metal bin they used for garden waste. Flame caught. Curled. Hungry. He watched himself burn, the stolen versions, the twisted reflections, the commodified scenes. He knew he couldn't erase the stories from the world. He couldn't stop people reading them. He couldn't undo what Paul had done. But he could choose, in this one small act, not to let those versions rule him. Mary watched from the doorway. When he came back inside, smelling of smoke and rain, she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Tomorrow, he said quietly, I'll call the studio. I want to work. Not to run. To work. She smiled. There you are, she whispered. Later, years after, people would talk about Freddie Mercury's demons. They'd point to the drugs, the parties, the reckless nights. They'd blame the disease, the times, the industry. Few would talk about the day he looked at the man who claimed to protect him and saw, clearly, that some of the worst damage in his life had been done not by enemies, but by someone who called himself a friend. The day he fired Paul Prenter was not just the day he cut ties with a manager. It was the day he took back his voice. Not the one that shook stadiums. The one that decided who got close. And who never would again.